Hello. For tonight's Grisly Tale, I'm going to read you a story from More Grisly Tales for Gruesome Kids. These are cautionary tales that I wrote for lovers of squeam. Tonight's story is called The Upset Stomach. This is a terrible tale of neglect, which should serve as a warning to all of you children who want everything now, with no thought for the consequences. Ethel was a greedy child. She was forever snacking. She never had one helping where two would do, and she was forever scheming to find new ways to eat more without being sick. Her parents, Mr. and Mrs. Turnip, had long since given up trying to curb their daughter's gluttony, and 9 times out of 10 they gave in to her whims without so much as a whimper. One winter, just before Christmas, Ethel read an article in the sports section of the newspaper about a company that was breeding stomachs for the annual stomach rolling competition in Netherwallop, Yorkshire. Sensing a glorious opportunity for double gorging, she stood on the kitchen table and told her parents what she wanted for Christmas. "I want another stomach," she said. "I'll give it a name and carry it around with me wherever I go so that I can eat twice as much food as I do now." Her parents looked faintly disgusted. But won't a stomach leave a mess around the house?" queried her mother. "With all those juices?" "I'll keep it in a box," said Ethel, belching loudly as she finished her 4th rack of toast. "With air holes." "And what does it eat?" asked her father. "Well, everything," scoffed Ethel. "It's a stomach, Dumbo." And does it need much looking after?" "Well, it needs walking every day so it doesn't get fat. It needs food and water. And it needs me," she replied. "So it's a bit like a pet dog," reasoned her father. "No, it's a stomach," said Ethel. Her voice was tinged with disdain. "But if thinking of it as a dog will convince you to let me have one, I'll call it Rover." Mr. and Mrs. Turnip had no answer. "Good," clapped their daughter. "Then that's settled. I'll phone up the farm and have one delivered." And that was that. That was all the thought that Ethel gave to buying a new pet. 2 weeks later, the stomach was delivered. "Whatever it is," sniffed the postman with the clothes peg on his nose, "it don't half pong, and it hasn't stopped slurping and gurgling since it left the depot." "Well, it must be hungry," said Ethel. "Is it a troll?" asked the postman. "No," said the girl. "Is it a jacuzzi?" "No." "It's not a wee widdly pygmy treading grapes, is it?" "Oh, go away," said Ethel. "You are very stupid." And she took the sticky parcel from the postman and shut the door. Mr. and Mrs. Turnip wanted to keep Ethel's presents in its box until Christmas Day, but Ethel wouldn't hear of it. Without so much as a "thank you" or "do you mind if I do?" she slid a paper knife under the lid and opened the box. The stomach was the size of a basketball. It looked like a grey jellyfish, without the tentacles, obviously, and made a constant sloshy, sucky noise like 2 hippos kissing. Ethel lifted it out of its box and immediately dropped it on the floor when a tiny stream of liquid squirted out of a hole in the stomach's side and splashed the table. "Oh, what was that?" she squealed as the tablecloth smoked and dissolved into a hole. "Gastric juices," sighed her father, pointing to a warning on the box. "Beware! Acid! Gastric juices burn." From that moment on, Ethel liked her stomach just a little bit less. But come Christmas Day, the pet stomach performed to Ethel's satisfaction. When presented with food, it did exactly what it had said on the box. The stomach and Ethel ate 2 platefuls of turkey, potatoes, sprouts, peas, bread sauce, stuffing, parsnips, sausages and gravy in 90 seconds. After scoffing all of the Christmas pudding, leaving nothing for her parents, 2 dozen mince pies, a tub of brandy butter, a box of chocolates and 61 dates, Ethel stretched out on the sofa and groaned. She was fit to burst. So was the stomach. It rolled away from the table gingerly, making tiny farty noises as it went, and leaving a trail of gloopy goo on the floor. When it reached the sofa, it looked up longingly at its new master in a pathetically doggy sort of way, and bounced up onto Ethel's stomach, where it instantly collapsed into a full-bellied sleep. Ethel didn't have the strength to push it off, much as she would have liked to, and the 2 of them slept like logs through the Queen's speech. At 5 o'clock, however, the swollen stomach woke with a start and shoved itself into Ethel's face. The stench of decomposing food kick-started her brain. She shrieked and leapt off the sofa. "Well, I think it wants to go outside into the garden," said Mrs. Turnip. The stomach jumped up and down as if to say yes. Rather urgently she added, "You take it," mumbled Ethel. "I'm too tired." So her poor mother, who had done all the cooking and all the washing up, had to carry Ethel's stomach into the garden, where it did what a stomach has to do behind the raspberries. For the rest of Christmas Day and all of Boxing Day, the stomach was a perfect pet. It followed Ethel around the house, jumped up playfully when she stood still, and gurgled with pleasure whenever she deigned to look at it. But Ethel became irritated by its constant doe-eyed attention. When she had asked for a stomach, she hadn't realised quite how much tender, loving care it would require. "Well, it's only trying to be friendly," said Mr. Turnip. "I think it's rather sweet," added her mother, who had a soft spot for poor defenceless creatures. "Well, then it can sleep on your bed tonight," moaned the girl. "I didn't get a wink of sleep last night with its rumblings and grumblings and little squeaky noises." "No thanks," said her parents, who had just invested £20 in new sheets. And while we're on the subject," continued Ethel, "I'm not taking it for a walk again either. Passers-by sniggered at me, and when I headed up my jumper, 3 boys laughed till they split their trousers. They said I had the fattest stomach they'd ever seen, so I told them it wasn't mine, and to prove it, I pulled the stomach out from underneath my jumper. Oh, you should have heard their screams. They thought I'd disemboweled myself." "Well, you should have thought of these things before you asked us to buy it," admonished her father. "Yeah, well, I'm thinking about it now," sulked Ethel. "It's quite fun having 2 stomachs at meal times, but the rest of the time it's a complete load of poo." The stomach could tell when it wasn't wanted. It slunk away into the corner and wept sad green tears of bile. That night the unloved stomach slept in the garden in a makeshift kennel. Mr. Turnip lined a cardboard box with cling film to stop its gastric juices leaking out and ruining his grass. But there was a heavy frost, and in the morning, when Mrs. Turnip came out to feed it, the stomach was rock hard and blue with cold. "It needs warming up," she told Ethel. "Take it for a run." "Oh, do I have to?" whined the selfish girl. "Stomachs can run by themselves, you know." But when her father threatened to stop cooking oven chips, Ethel did as she was told. The stomach looked like a hideously fat chihuahua, and Ethel was filled with embarrassment and loathing as she dragged it round the park. Then all of a sudden she had a wicked idea. She placed the stomach behind a tree and told it to count up to 100 while she went and hid. But this was no game of hide and seek. The moment she was out of sight, Ethel sprinted home, abandoning the stomach to the foxes that lived in the wood. When she ran in through the kitchen door, she made up a wild story about dogs attacking the stomach and eating it, and how extremely upset she was, which she wasn't really, and what a horrible colour last night's supper had been, and could she have another Christmas present? Suddenly the doorbell rang. "A young lady left her space hopper in the park," said the smiling policeman, bouncing the stomach on the front step. Unfortunately, he bounced too hard because the stomach guffed like a goat. "Phew," he winced. "Think it might have sprung a leak." And with that he dropped the stomach and ran behind a tree to be sick. Ethel was not happy to see her stomach again. She hated how feeble and helpless it was. She loathed the way it depended on her for everything. So early the next morning, she packed the stomach into 6 plastic bags, caught a bus into the countryside, and threw the stomach into a field of cows. It sank into the mud and gurgled plaintively, but Ethel felt no pity. She laughed cruelly and ran all the way home for food. "Where's Rover?" asked Mrs. Turnip later that night. "I've cooked its favourite meal." "Dead," lied Ethel. "Don't talk to me about it. I'm grieving." But the stomach was not dead. The stomach was hungry. Hungry for food and revenge. It tugged itself out of the mud and squirted a startled cow with its gastric juices. Then it ate her, and all her friends, and all the sheep in the next field. And by the time it had polished off the chicken farm and the dovecot on the other side of the road, the stomach was 6 metres tall and growing. It was a giant blob. It wobbled down the road like a huge jellied haggis, scaring cyclists into ditches and squirting acid at passing motorists. It rolled into the nearest village and terrorised the old folks, who thought it was the ghost of Winston Churchill. It squidged a vicar, picked clean the pick-your-own-fruit farm, and drank all the beer in the pub. The giant stomach rumbled like an erupting volcano as it soaked the countryside with a shower of acid rain, laid waste to all that stood in its way, and headed home to Ethel's. It appeared on the 6 o'clock news. "Killer stomach on the loose," sensationalised the reporter. "Ew," shuddered an old lady in Lewis. "A loose stomach the size of St Paul's Dome? What a smelly mess." "The stomach is angry," the reporter went on. "It is what psychiatrists classically call an upset stomach." "Well, I'm only glad it won't be me with a shovel in me hand," muttered the old lady to her cat. "The Prime Minister is taking no chances and has sent in troops." But the stomach squirted acid at the tanks and their guns dropped off. In her heart of hearts, the PM doubted that the stomach could ever be stopped. It carved swathes of acid death through Middle England and only came to a halt when it rumbled up to Ethel's front door. "What do you want?" shouted Ethel. "Leave me alone." "I wouldn't speak to it like that if I was you," advised Mrs. Turnip. "I think it's rather cross." "I'm its master," the girl said. "It does what I say." "Oh, not any more," whispered her father, raising his eyes to the sky where the bloated stomach was blocking out the sun. It rolled forward over the fence and spat at Ethel. "I think it wants you," trembled Mrs. Turnip. "Oh, whatever shall we do, dear? Why is it so upset?" "I know," said Mr. Turnip. "Maybe it's got wind." And he rushed inside to find his indigestion tablets in the hope that they might offer some relief. But by the time he came back out, the problem was solved. The stomach had eaten Ethel. It had sucked her up. It had got what it had come for and was now leaving town. But just as it reached the road, there was a terrible, gutsy rumble, a churning, bubbling, hot-spit growl that shook the earth to its core. Eating Ethel was the stomach's big mistake. The greedy girl was one mouthful too many. Like an exploding pig on a fairground stall, the stomach burst and covered the turnip house in fleshy shrapnel. Ethel had still not been digested and was expelled across the lawn. She shot through an open window and ended up on her own bed, dazed, bewildered, and covered in bits of pink offal that smelled 4 times worse than a barrel of bad fish. Ethel is no longer greedy. She hasn't got the stomach for food anymore. You see, she still hasn't got that smell out of her nose, which means that all food tastes the same to her. Awful. Remember, a stomach is for life, not just for Christmas.